Welcome to our live event today. We are going to be working on some placemats, and I was searching for a name for them, and then I came up with the Evergreen event placement. And I will go into detail what that means in just a moment, but make sure that you go to the link in the chat portion and download the pattern if you haven't done so, or you can go back later. You can scroll through the chat and find that link if you didn't have time to download and print it yet. No, it's there. Also, pop in and let us know where you're watching from. I'm always quite amazed by the broad range of locations that pop up. Our Canada contingent is usually quite wide. And then it's so much fun to see names come up from Florida to Montana to California to Maine and across the pond or way south of us. I know we've had people from Brazil, people from France, from the UK. It is so fun to see all of our community come together and hang out for a while and have a little quilt break every other week or so. The pattern that we're working on today, like I said, is called the Evergreen Event Placement. And the idea behind the word evergreen really doesn't have to do with the fact that it's green. When I was working on this, I was kind of thinking St. Patrick's Day, because yes, I know we aren't to Valentine's Day yet, but as quilters, we kind of need a little cushion in there. So probably you've done a lot of your St. Valentine kind of gifts and decor already. But if not, the Valentine Makers Bundle of patterns is still out there. So I believe our moderator will probably drop in a link to that, or maybe you've seen it already on Craftsy. I think I saw it even last night. There's a bundle of patterns with cooking things, crochet, knit, sewing, crafting, all kinds of wonderful things that you can do for Valentine's Day. But if you've got Valentine's Day in the rear view already and you're looking toward the next kind of holiday to decorate for or have a theme, St. Patrick's Day is one near and dear to my heart because I do have Irish roots on my dad's side. My relatives came from Ireland in the 1850s, I believe it was, so that they could survive. They were sharecroppers. They needed someplace to move and start over. And so the United States is where they landed. So that Irish roots kind of mean a lot to me when it comes to St. Patrick's Day. So maybe not everybody celebrates St. Patrick's Day, but I'm going to call this the Evergreen Placemat event or event placemat, because for whatever event you want to create something like this pattern is very doable, can easily be converted to any genre of fabric. So what I mean by that is that evergreen, those trees and shrubs and bushes, I get to get it right because I say some things, my husband who's a forester will be like, no, it's not called an evergreen. But those things that stay evergreen throughout the year, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about this pattern. This pattern can be easily converted to any genre, any event that you have in mind. So I even went and dug up some ideas of how this could be converted. So we have just the base placemat section here where your plate is more than likely, or your dessert or some kind of fancy tea setting may end up landing. And this portion will be covered partway. But then all those scraps, as well as I do, that we have scraps of certain genres. So that's the question for you today. I've got someone from Roseville, California, somebody from Chicago watching. Wonderful. What is your favorite genre of fabric? Some people love solids. They love anything blue. Other people are like, I love everything fall, those autumn colors as they come together. Some people like everything reproduction, whether it's 1930s or Civil War. Some like just those wonderful muted colors of the modern grouping, kind of a dusty rose, a blush, maybe a little bit of a kind of a mustard color in there, maybe a little gray blue. I've seen mauve come back again. So what's your favorite genre of fabric? Oh, somebody said batiks. Oh, love batiks. Not everyone is a batik lover, and that's okay. Some of us like that intensity of color that batiks give. So maybe you have some large pieces of batik that you would love to use here as a focus, and then drop in all of those wonderful, almost like a rainbow of colors, kind of a sunset of colors. You could cut strips off of leftover fabrics that you have that you don't know exactly what to do with, but you don't want to throw away. So that evergreen pattern can be then converted to those colorways that you enjoy. Someone put in jewel tones in purples, blues, and reds. Oh, love it. Another says everything gray blue. So see, you have a flavor. Everyone does. And in the quilt shops I've worked in over the years, I've noticed certain people have certain things that they always gravitate to, and there's nothing wrong with that. People have asked me, do I have a favorite? And I'm like, I've worked in quilt shops. I've worked for Quilt Magazine. I hate to say this, but I love the whole entire crayon box. I could probably play in every genre that's been ever created. So I try to present in a wide range of possibilities so that it kind of appeals to everyone. So now that you realize this can be a different genre, I played with it already, and I did Halloween. Of course, that orange and black is just fun. I've had this pumpkin print for I don't know how long, and this would be a great way to get it used up. So playing with just orange and blacks for Halloween, it can be converted to patriotic, no matter what color your flag is. If you're Canada, I can see this all in red and white. If you're, I don't know the other flags. I'm sorry. I don't have all those memorized, but I know that your colors of whatever your country is can easily be put into something like this so that you have that patriotic one, maybe even to give to a veteran in honor of their service, to have that something special for their table. So that's a possibility of doing those kind of fabrics. Then there's always, you can convert that to spring. I'm sitting here in Iowa and super cold, and I'm thinking spring. I want the snow to be gone. I want the flowers to come up. So I pulled these out as possibilities. Tulips, rosebuds. Wouldn't those make some fabulous placemats? Also, just thinking towards, Easter's coming eventually, and spring flowers are going to come up and the grass is going to turn green. So converting that evergreen pattern, that everlasting pattern, into a table dressing that you can make very quickly without too much fuss with the fabrics you already have. Okay, I've got someone from Michigan, and she loves the spring collections. There are so many pretty fabrics coming out. It's amazing. Valentine's, yes, this would be perfect in the red, pink, cream. And it would be, if you haven't gotten anything done yet for Valentine's Day, you can do one of these in a morning. I promise you. I did some super simple quilting on here, and we'll talk about that at the end. So this is going to be the ticket if you are short on time, okay? So the Evergreen placemat, event placemat. So pattern, make sure you download. If you are new to quilting and you are a beginner, this is a perfect place for you to start. We're going to focus on cutting. We're going to focus on that 1/4 inch seam. And guess what? There's even a check for you, because this piece is cut 12.5. This has to be 12.5 when you're done, when you put all those seams together. So if your 1/4 inch is off just a little, this is going to be your check, because this pieced portion needs to fit to this when you're done. If it's off by a little tiny bit, it will still work. Don't worry. You're just going to be hiding it inside your binding as you put that on. But this is going to be kind of the double check for you to see if you're really being honest about whether or not your 1/4 inch seam is spot on. Okay. So how do you download the pattern? The link is in the chat portion of our video. And if you click on that at some point, it's going to take you to our website. And it's going to ask you to put in your email address. We want to know that you got the pattern. So by simply putting your email address in there, then you will be able to, we'll be able to send you the download for the pattern. So that's how it always works. Sometimes people go, if I just type something in, no, you have to actually click on the link, put in your email address, and then you'll get your pattern. So It's quite simple to do. That way I'll give you access, and you can also look around in there later for all of the other patterns, because everything we do here in these free live events, those patterns live there, so that you can go through the, if you go to live events and go to patterns, you'll find all of the things that maybe you thought, I was going to download and I didn't. So you can also go to the website to get those at nationalquiltercircle.com. Let's see what else. We've got people watching from all over this morning. Okay, so when I was working on this, trying to decide what portion do I, what am I going to use as my main focus piece? The pattern does tell that for a calculation of 4 placemats, because that tends to be the number people want for their table. So make sure that you notice in bold letters, underlined, I don't want you to miss it. The yardage there is calculated for a set of 4. Now, if you're not going to use 4, you can cut it in half and just do 2. Or you can make 4 and give 2 to a friend and keep 2 for yourself. But then in the cutting, it's individually, so that we can talk about the sizes needed there and not have so many multiples to have to deal with. So that's how it's written. Sorry if that's not your favorite way to do it, but it was kind of, how do I do this? So the focus fabric I chose, I had a large piece of this tone on tone dark green, and then I literally just went through the bin of green fabrics that I had and pulled out as many greens as I could find. Now, these are kind of after I weeded through to decide which ones I wanted to use. Sometimes greens can be more olive toned and yellow. Sometimes it can be more blue and gray toned. I was trying to go for kind of more that St. Patrick's Day, kind of a true into hunter green kind of look. So this is what I pulled out. Someone asks if I have to come back to at another time. Oh, she just had surgery, so I hope we're doing well. Remember to follow all the instructions that your physical therapist and your doctor give you. So because we want you back here. Are you missing the sewing? I'm missing the sewing today, but you know what? This video also lives on our website. So if you get into the tabs that says more and videos, you can find this live event and you can watch it 4 weeks from now, 4 months from now. So you aren't missing anything. We promise. When we say we're bringing you content, we're bringing you content that will last forever. So you can go in at your leisure. You can go in there at 2 a.m. and watch it if you really wanted to, if you can't sleep. I bet I can put you to sleep. So don't worry about missing anything. The patterns and the videos are still available at your convenience. That's why we bring this to you in this format, because it's all about you, our quilting community. So back to the pieces I was picking out. I was trying to find some that had some light in them. So I picked something that had a white background, kind of an even number of green to white background, and then a little bit darker. So it's got some white in it, and kind of run that gradation. This is a good practice on value, on colors. Trying to do something that's not all the same value, all that medium, because we tend to go with that medium value. And that's kind of where our eye is comfortable picking those, but you need some in the light end and you need some in the dark end. So I picked a couple in the light end, really light end, then getting a little bit darker. And then I went to some that were really super dark, so that you see the difference between the actual pieces. So your eye can kind of go, ooh, I like that. Ooh, I like that. And some are kind of muted. And, oh, I should even say that when you buy fabric, you buy both sides of the fabric. This is actually a metallic. And when I put it in with the others, it seemed to stick out. And I didn't know if I wanted a metallic in there. So guess what? The back side is a dark forest green. So he's actually writing in this placemat upside down. You have to remember that when you go to piece it in. But that gives you the option of using either side of a metallic, because the metallic is applied to the surface and it doesn't soak all the way through. And I even wanted to go a little wild. Now this fabric, I think I get this as a free fat quarter somewhere. It is a wild, dark background with those bright greens on it. And I left a piece of that in there, put a piece of that in there just for fun, because it was a dark background and it had all the colors I'm looking for. Then I was looking for some that have some pattern to them. This one has a lattice work in little dots. I picked something that had kind of tonal, So try to pick some different textures while you're at it so that it has some interest as you sit down to the table. It's something for your eye to play with. So when we're picking colors, there's a lot to think about in picking the colors for a project like this. Seems very simple, but when you start digging into it, you get to learn a little bit about your values and what maybe you've been picking in the past. And maybe you want to practice getting into the lighter versions and those darkers so that you have that variation in tone when you put things together. Now, when it comes to cutting it out, pretty straightforward about cutting the large piece here. Let's worry more about cutting these small pieces, because when you're cutting small pieces, any variation is going to be a little bit more noticeable. And I've listed on there to use like an 8x14 ruler. You can use a larger one if you like, if you have that 18 or a 8.5 by 24.5, whatever it takes to cut that larger section. But when we're cutting these small ones, sometimes it's nice to step down. And when I talk about using rulers, usually a 6 or 6.5 comes into the mix of I gotta have that size in my toolbox. So the 6, this is actually a 6-inch square, and it's by Quilter Select. Now they're not, I don't get paid to advertise their products, but I do like their rulers because they have a matte finish on the back. It makes it very easy to read through the ruler, but that matte finish on the back is kind of tacky, and it really does help if you have issues with rulers sliding across your fabric as you cut. That tends to be one of the most common issues that quilters have, is being able to hold that ruler in place so they get an accurate cut. And we're cutting 4.5 by 1.5 like bricks for that pieced portion of our table placement. So first off, you're going to get all those pieces out of your stash, and you're probably going to have to iron them. More than likely, unless you're extremely neat and tidy about how you put things away, you're going to need to do a little pressing to get them flat, because the accurate cut comes from the fabric laying against the mat, nice and neat, not bubbled with a crease in it. You'll have better luck. And then the ruler that doesn't slide, I want to be able to show you really quick, because when I've demoed this when I worked in a shop, I didn't want to like these, but after I tried them, it's like, really? Okay, traditional ruler on fabric, glides like I am polishing the floor. Switching to a Quilter Select ruler that has that tackiness to the back. When I lay it on there, I mean, I'm trying to move it. It's not moving. It grips to the fabric. So in order to adjust it, I actually have to pick it up and slide it and move it physically in order to get where I want to be. So when I'm cutting, I'm not going to end up making a weird slice because my ruler crept away on me and I didn't get an accurate cut. So in this case, we're cutting these 1.5 by 4.5. See, I'm even referencing my pattern because I've been working on so many different projects lately. I did cut the end of this strip recently, and so I know it's straight there. The other edges are a little off because they're scraps from another project. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to overcut. That means that it is wider than 1.5 inches here. It is 4.5 long. I'm going to pick up my ruler and then drop it back over and place it so that I have the 4.5, that dotted line of the ruler laying right on the edge of the cut fabric in both directions, 1.5 here and 4.5 here, and then make a neat cut here. Now, when cutting, usually I will say always away and across the top are the two directions that I feel comfortable, and not worry about my fingers. If something would happen to go wrong with the rotary cutter and it would jump, I'm holding my fingers back, so I'm going here and here. That's comfortable for me. I try not to ever push toward myself because that just looks like stitches waiting to happen, and I've had stitches before. Not from a rotary cutter, but growing up, it's not much fun to have to worry about stitches. Okay, so you're going to cut 12 of these 1.5 by 4.5 wide. And let's take that out of the picture. I've got a stack of pieces here that we can play with and talk about piecing these together. Let's see. It's all about balance. That's true. Keeping number one, your balance when you're cutting, and a balance of color. Balance can be interpreted in many ways, but balance of color, that light to dark range, a little bit of everything makes for an interesting effect. So let's see, anybody else? There we do have the download there for the pattern. So make sure that if you haven't gotten it, that's one of the times that our moderator has put it in there. Now you'll see that this is kind of olive toned, and I'm sorry, but my mat is green also. But the colors, I want a little bit of everything in here. So if I want to leave the olive, maybe I need to find him a friend to kind of transition between that color there. I cut so many pieces recently. Been working on a scrap buster project too, so I have fabric everywhere. Maybe this olive guy is going to not even end up in this project. You never know. I always cut a lot of pieces because I think, well, what if I want to use that? So there's always those few pieces that get kicked back out. Ooh, we need some dark in here. Let's put a dark here. And we need some interest in between. These two are too, they're kind of a mottled look, and I want some texture in there. So let's throw in the plaid. I know some people's eyes will roll, and they'll be like, plaid, really? Yes, plaid. Plaids and polka dots to me are just the fun place to let the eye just roll around and have some fun. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, let's see. 10. Ooh, this is another good one. 11. It looks so big when you have it laid out, but we need 12 inches finished. And in order to get, these are going to have a lot of seam allowance come out. Oh, here's one I want to use. The fun fabric that I ended up using on the back. Let's see where, let's put him here. Oh, let's put this guy in between. So I break my lights up in between the darks. So I've got a real array of colors. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road, and we have to make sure we're actually doing a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm going to put right sides together, and I'm going to bring this over. It's nice to have a spot where you can lay them right beside your sewing machine if you have them in the order that you want. And I'm going to do them in pairs. So I'm going to bring them over in pairs beside me. This. So that they're kind of marching into the sewing machine. So I have now 6 pairs that I need to put together into as accurate of a 1/4 inch seam as possible. So if you have your machine set for a 1/4 inch, I have my needle moved so that the side of my piecing foot will give me an accurate 1/4 inch. If you like to use a 1/4 inch foot, it's one that has a little smaller notch in it, tells you exactly where a 1/4 inch is. There are some that also have a bumper, a blade on one side. It kind of reminds me of bumper bowling as a kid. Don't ask. I don't bowl well. I needed bumpers, probably still do. But it gives you that bumper to run the cut edge of your fabric along. The only thing when you're using that is do not slide your fabric in there too far up into the bumper, because then you're going to make your seam allowance too wide. It's a guide for the cut edge not to be shoved in too tightly. So the best 1/4 inch that you can create. On mine, the fabric needs to ride just under the foot. If it starts to poke out, I know I'm getting too wide, so that it just has to hide right under the edge of my presser foot. Now, machines do have different settings. Some have limited settings of where you can move your needle. That was one thing that when I bought a new machine, I wanted one that I could adjust the needle in kind of micro steps so that I could get just the needle right where I wanted it to. If you have a machine that doesn't have that, then look for putting maybe a piece of painter's tape, Post-it note. There are magnets on the market that can be put onto the bed of your machine also, so you have that visual guide. There are all kinds of different products available to help you get that 1/4 inch seam as accurate as possible. Okay. I'm not going to get to the last one here. We're going to end up running out of time for today. But if we have them linked like this, now I always have a little spider at the beginning. That's a little waste piece of fabric that my machine likes to not stitch into nothing. So I put something in right there, help me get started, then put my piecing up next to it. It jumps from the spider fabric onto my piecing, and then I don't get a big nest of fabrics there. So if you haven't seen me do that in the past, now you'll know what that little tail on my sewing machine is all about. Okay, let's come in, and I'm going to break these apart. I'm going to leave them laying in order. I'm snipping the thread from one to the other because I love to chain piece. And then I'm going to come in and take it over to the ironing surface. Maybe I can slide my ironing board in a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. Making sure, yep, my iron is ready to go. And I'm going to press my seams. Always make sure you take that time to set the seam, get it warm. I always say that when I was teaching that warm fabric bends easier than cold fabric. So I come in and open that up with my fingers very gently, pushing the seam allowance to one side. Then I'm picking up the next one, doing the same thing, warming it up, pressing the seam allowance to one side. And I tend to stack them kind of one on top of the other, so I keep my order. If it happens to end up in a different order, it's not the end of the world. We have great intentions sometimes when we start, and then life happens, and the phone rings, or a kid needs our attention, or the dog needs to go out, and then things happen. It's okay too. Do we have any other questions? Somebody from Kansas is watching. Wonderful, Christina, I believe. And Diana says, watching from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne. Wonderful. The Screaming Eagles. I'll have to give a shout out to North Carolina for the U.S. Marine Corps too, because if my son ever saw me just promoting one branch and not his, I might be in trouble. We are a multi-serving family because we have had over the years, Marines, Army. I have great uncles who were in the Air Force, a dad who was in the Navy. So we have covered everything, I think, except maybe the Coast Guard. So getting everything pressed, make sure that when you press, you open all the way to the seam allowance so that you make sure that it actually will end up the 12.5 inches you need to match it up to the focus section of your placemat. And wow, that iron is really hot today. I love the cordless because then I don't have to worry about the cord getting in my way. Sometimes they do cool down a bit as you're working. You have to put it back on its base always, but okay, we've got that many pieces. Now I've got my pairs, and I will put the pairs together next until I create that whole chain of fabrics. And I do have 2 more here. But as you put these together, again, you can just do one on top of the other, hoping to match that up. Now, I did talk about starting from different directions, so that sometimes when we're sewing together 2 pieces of fabric and it's a long piece, we tend to want to start stitching on one end of the strip here and then come back and do the other direction because things can get distorted in piecing long strips. So I did suggest that in this tutorial or in this pattern, but because these are short, it may not make too much difference. I tried over and over to see if I could get mine to distort, and I didn't. It stayed fairly well stacked. So if you have an issue with pieces kind of slipping back and forth when you're always starting from one direction, the presser foot tends to scoot them just a tiny bit, and it starts to create a slant. The idea is seam one direction, this seam going from left to right, this one from right to left, going back, so that it kind of corrects any scoot of the presser foot or the feed dot in your sewing machine. So if you have that where it starts to get kind of a slant to your column, try doing that, switching directions of stitching. But because these are short, it tends not to happen too bad, but I wanted to address that in case someone has that pop up. Okay, what's the name of the cordless iron? It is one from Maytag. It is an older iron. I'm not sure if it has a specific number on it. It just says Maytag cordless iron. So there are other companies that make cordless irons out there. So I would say check out some cordless irons if that is of any interest to you, but check out the reviews on how long the sole plate stays hot. That's kind of an important value for us as quilters because we tend to stitch for a long time or having to work on large pieces. And look for the reviews to see. This one may not be available anymore. It is a little bit older. Okay. Hello from Arizona. Hi, Kelly, I think it is. Do you press to one side or press the seams open? In this case, I press the seam allowances all in one direction. It's not as bulky, so you're not going to be putting any other seams to match up. So one side tends to work pretty well. And it is, yes, it's a placemat, but it's off to the side. So you're not going to be probably putting a cup or glass on it. So you don't have to worry about it being bumpy there for setting down a glassware or anything on it. Sometimes on placemats, you want as flat as possible. But because this is kind of where the silverware tends to reside, pressing to one seam works fine. Okay, any other questions? Hi, Laura from California. Glad you made it back to California in one piece and not frozen after being in freezing Minnesota. Let's see. Do we have any others? We have Sandra watching from Ottawa, Canada. It seems to me you can make them reversible as long as the colors went together. That you could do. You could make it reversible. You could, because you have a stack here, you could put a stack on this side and be able to flip them over. As long as the binding that you use works for both colorways. Sometimes can be the kicker is the binding that finishes that outer edge. We want it to look nice as a frame. And if you can find a binding that goes for both sides, yes, you definitely can make them a two-faced kind. You could do St. Patrick's Day on one side and Valentine on the other. Maybe you're using gray or a cream and you could use a binding in that color. That way it would work with both sides. Perfect idea. What a great idea, a way of using up even more pieces. So once you get all this stitched together, you're going to put right sides together and do a seam to join the pieced stack to the main portion of your placemat. Now, I said we would cover a little bit on the quilting because we're getting a little longer on time. So let's get into our quilting here and how I marked it because I'm working on a dark color. And dark colors are always a challenge of how do I quilt it and how do I mark it if I want to do some marking. So I actually started with one idea and totally mutated to something else. Is that how quilters go? We always change our mind midway. So on the pieced portion here, I'm going to try to hold it to the camera. You can see that I did a very close stitch on each side of the seam so that it's just very, very close. It's like a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch from each of the seams down the stack to hold everything in place. I just wanted the fabrics to be the big showcase here. And with a narrow strip that's only 1 inch finished, I didn't have a lot of places to do a lot of fussy quilting. So I just did simple outline using my walking foot or a dual feed foot, if that's what your machine has, so that all of the layers go through the machine at the same rate and you don't get a wrinkle in your quilting. It's really important to use that walking foot or dual feed foot in order to get that nice flat effect, because then it feeds both layers at the same time. Without it, the feed dogs of our machine in the base, those little teeth come up and push, but there's batting in between. And if you don't switch over from a regular piecing foot, it's going to feed that bottom piece fast, but that squish of the, it's like a great technical term, the squish, that squish of the batting is going to make the top layer kind of slide to the side. And if you go from different directions as you do your quilting, it's going to go back and forth and create kind of a ripple effect in your piecing. So even feed or dual feed foot, you may have even an integrated one that's built into your machine. This guy is real simple. He has an actual walking foot that gets switched on. Some of them have that built-in little piece that comes down and attaches to the your actual piecing foot and makes it into a quilting foot for you. But make sure that you do that when you're doing your piecing here or your quilting here. The other quilting that I did, and if I hold it to the light, I don't know if you can see it very well there. It's channel quilted there. Maybe if I hold the back up, you can see the lines a little better. There you go. You can see that I did almost like a beadboard kind of effect. I did 2 lines of stitching very close together, and they're 2 inches apart. This is 14 inches finished, so I can divide that by 2. It makes 7 increments. Sometimes we have to use that math, that wonderful math we learned in grade school. We have to be able to, if you want it to be an even division of space, you have to think about it's 14 inches finished. How do I divide that up into even increments and not have the last row really close to the binding? So I divided it by 2, and I have 7 increments across. I was using a I'm going to think about it. It is a ceramic pencil. 2 or 3 different companies. I know of at least 3 companies that make these. It looks like a mechanical pencil that you have gray lead in, but it comes with different ceramic leads. You can buy yellow, pink, white, green, and gray. On green, dark green especially, this is always going to be like, what color are you going to mark? Because none of the friction pens are going to show up. Plus, friction pens on the front of fabric, never quite a good idea. You could use a chalk liner, but a chalk liner tends to smudge, and you're wanting really precise lines. So you need something that will stay in place and not migrate all over your quilt top. I'm going to make a line on here that I can take a wet cloth and take away later. But the ceramic pencil in white, I'm going to trace twice. Now you can see there's a white line, hopefully, between these 2 lines of stitching. It's a nice, neat line. I rub on it. It doesn't rub off, so that as it goes through the machine, it won't smudge, and I can get a nice straight line. Now, I only marked the 7 increments. Then I went back, and on my foot, it has little notches on the front of the foot, or find a spot that you can keep your eye on. And I did about 1/8 of an inch to one side, and did it to the same, always to the left of the first stitching. So keep track. I did the 7 increments first, and then I went back and said to the left, to the left, to the left, to the left, and did that parallel line through there. Don't worry if it's not perfect. The eye will kind of do the correction. So about 1/8 of an inch in parallel lines. It kind of looks like a beadboard kind of effect in a channel quilt. That's very simple, very easy to do, and accomplishable by you in a very short amount of time. I did one of these in a morning. So I know that even with all the searching of the colors and the cutting, I still made one of these in a morning. So, and did the quilting. So very accomplishable by you and in any genre that you decide to pick. Let's see. We have Linda watching from North Central Pennsylvania, home of Little League Baseball. I have been there. My kids all played baseball, Little League Baseball, not quite to that level. And my daughter played softball, and we are Cubs fans forever, hopeless in this household. And we have been to the Little League Hall of Fame. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got the Evergreen Placemat. So you can switch it over to any genre you like, download the pattern. Now, if you have time, there's always the Love Notes Placemat, which is a pattern that lives on our website that you can find. Love Notes is the name of this placemat. And Woven, I think this is Woven Hearts. I can't remember now. I made this one a year ago. It's kind of that Swedish Hearts kind of woven basket look that we remember from being kids in Valentine parties in school. So those patterns are out there if you haven't downloaded those and are interested. I'm going to give you a teaser for one coming up. It's not quilted yet. And remember, I said I was very Irish, so, or at least want to be. And this is a teaser for, now I have to think about it, Shamrock Shenanigans. So that's going to be our St. Patrick's Day one. And stay tuned to see how I quilt it, because it's going to take a while to get it done. Now, the very last thing I wanted to address is that in January, we talked about putting things on our to-do list that we want to get finished. And I finished the quilting and binding on Boxed In, which was a sew along during the close down early 2020 in March, I believe. So this pattern is out there. It has a different name, but I think there are 2 versions of it available on our website. So I got that one done. And just to keep myself accountable, this one, I can't show you all of it yet because the pattern isn't available yet, but It's bound and quilted. So I have 2 things off my list. Amazing. So this one is a future to come project. I'm not even sure it has a name yet. So be looking forward to something kind of like Emerald Eyes, but in a different scale. So a future quilt, but quilted and bound. So 2 things off my list. So hopefully you're working on your list, having some fun, following us on Facebook at National Quilter Circle. Thanks for joining me today.